Now then. This is the second part of my Death House Foundry guide. So this is where I take a specific location from Curse of Strahd and I fly through it and I show you what I did in Foundry specifically for that location. Death House, this video is not going to be quite the quality and quite have as many features as the previous one, mainly because I didn't do Death House in Foundry. I did it in my old piece of software. We were using Fantasy Grounds at the time. I had the first few rooms of Death House done as a Foundry demo when my group went on to using Foundry, but we didn't get to the locations we're doing today. So I've honestly just thrown this together really quickly, just so Death House is finished and there's a few areas to talk about. Future videos, pretty much everything after this video, in terms of these Foundry guides, has been used live in my campaign, so we'll have quite a bit more detail. Same as last time, total Curse of Strahd spoilers in this video, as well as I'll talk significantly about popular changes made by community contributors Dragna Carter and MandyMod. I very much use a lot of their changes, particularly the escape from Death House sort of skill challenge. Our last video ended with us being up on the third floor, or the fourth if you're American, taking the secret staircase going down. So after that, that brought us down to the area known as the Catacombs. Now, a few things to keep in mind here. In terms of walling, I like to be really haphazard with the walls here. I like them to be a bit messy and not perfectly neat for two reasons. We're meant to believe that these have been hand dug by a family of, a husband and wife and their cultists over a number of years. I don't know where all the empty dirt has been taken, but they've also built a well in there as well. So we've got a bit of ridiculous digging here. I imagine it, and we can see from the wooden beams that it's not been properly reinforced. So I think smooth walls, rough walls are easier. There's also the fact that there's this hidden secret door here, which I don't like that secret door. I get that it's there for a bit of a Skyrim style. You've completed the dungeon, here's a quick way out. But as you'll see later, because we're going with the escape from Death House skill challenge, you kind of don't want a quick jump back to the front door. So I personally don't include that. But because the wall is so thin, you have to kind of be a bit sloppy and skew to conceal it. So doing that everywhere else, when I did this on Fantasy Grounds, the map masking wasn't as clear. So one of my players DM'd me mid-session saying, I can totally tell there's a hidden door there. I don't think the others have noticed yet. So I'm like, oh shit. So having sloppy doors everywhere else covers it up. I personally, even if a player searched this room, I want to see if there's any secret doors in this room. Well, firstly, I'd be very suspicious they'd read the module. But I take that out. I don't have that in my campaign. Up to you. I'm also very aware, and this will affect this and the next map, that the grid isn't very good here. That's because I no longer have access to the same Death House maps I did when I ran it live. So I'm using a heavily cropped version, and the grid doesn't fit perfectly. So you're going to notice that our main actor clips through the walls a little bit. Again, I'm just doing this video to show you tips and tricks of what I did. When you build yours, I'm sure you will map it out much better. So what did I do down here? I have put the creatures on. I just realised I've forgotten to add the shadows on. One of the things that's most dangerous about Death House is you've got a Grick here. Bearing in mind they should be, if you're going completely raw, I think they should be level 2 at this point. You've got a Grick here, 3 ghouls, it might even be 4, I can't remember without stopping to go and check. 3 or 4 ghouls, and then in this room I think 7 shadows. If a player was here and got scared by the Grick, or got crit by the Grick, they could decide to to spend their movement and action dashing to get away. So they could go 60 foot, they could very easily get the Grick, run out here. Now, the ghouls take a turn to come out the ground, if I remember rightly. But, once you step out there, they feel the vibrations or they smell life, however you want to flavour it, and they start coming out. You could have a player that pulls a Grick, 3 ghouls, maybe even 4, and 7 shadows. This is how people die in Death House. It is a very unforgiving dungeon. So a lot of people don't have the shadows all come out at once. I'll get to that in a minute. I'm not really going to cover this area much, because if I were running this live, I'd have journal entries in here reminding me what the loot is in which locations. I might even make some item parcels. I think one of these is like the head cultist footlocker. I might have made, if I was doing this in Foundry Live, I might have made a item parcel that contains, I think the Cloak of Protection is in there, and a couple of potions. I might have all that ready bundled out. One thing that I think is worth you talking about, or you deciding, particularly to do with lighting. So you can see here, Halvor has got a torch. This is meant to be, at least I interpreted, like an old mine in terms of these wooden posts. I imagine this being dirt rooms, wooden beams, going from the floor, supporting the ceiling. You might want to consider putting the outline of these posts as terrain walls. Now that will completely mess with line of sight. If it's pitch black down here, which it's going to be shortly, that will throw shadows and light in. Some of my players love that. One of my players hates it. It's up to you. The player who hated it said he hates it because it makes no sense. You can't see everything past it. You're meant to have freedom of movement within your 5-foot square as a player or as a creature. So they'd be able to move. So they didn't like it. Other players said they thought the atmospherics of it were really good. Try and set it up, see what you think. I have done that when we go a floor down shortly. So you are going to see what I mean, kind of. What else did I do down here? I configured, there's a module called Ambient Doors. Now I haven't done a full module video on that yet, but I am going to do one soon. I'm planning on scheduling these weekly Curse of Strahd scene videos to be weekly. There's a chance that I may have already released an Ambient Doors video before this, but if I haven't yet, when you watch this, it's coming soon. What Ambient Doors does is set a default sound across your world for doors open and closing, being locked and unlocked. But then for each door, if I go into the door settings, I have some new options of what sounds do I want. So I've used that down here. These are obviously the Durst family tombs, and the book describes them as having large stone slab doors. I've put these all as being locked, because if I remember rightly, they need a strength check to open. And what you may find with Foundry, which I love punishing with my group, is at first some players treat it like a video game. They go click happy. Oh, I can open this door, I can do that, I can move this. I lock it because there's a strength check involved in rolling the door open. The other thing is here. I'm going to show you something you can do here when we get down to it. I've also forgotten, I put an alert here for the trap. There's a pit trap. Now I've got somewhere a very good asset that my friend and one of my players, the Mad Cartographer, created. He made this token specifically for the Curse of Strahd Discord's Twice Bitten campaign, which airs every Saturday on Twitch. Twitch.tv/r Curse of Strahd. That is a rules as written Curse of Strahd playthrough. Very, very punishing. Very, very narratively done. It's very much in the style of Critical Role. It's fantastic. But he made a custom asset for the pit trap. Now, if I had it to hand, I've not checked this. I don't know what we're about to find. I could go in to my tile browser. Oh, right, that isn't the one that he made, but that is a pit trap. I'm going to use it. I'm going to drag that on. This isn't a perfect match, but it'll do. I am going to shrink it to the size I want, place it there, and then I can right click. Well, I'll lock it, but I can also right click and hide the asset. So I've got the reminder, the big red box for me as a DM, because sometimes hidden assets, particularly on darker maps or like busier maps with a lot of undergrowth or trees, your assets can go almost invisible. Even now, I quite often will start a combat and I'll think I've added all the enemies into like combat tracker, and then 4 rounds later, it only happened to me a few weeks ago on my stream, one of my players is like, what's this guy doing? He's just chilling on the edge of the map. You think, oh, I missed one of them out. So I like to put red alert boxes that only I can see. Again, that is a text box which I have marked as invisible, so only the DM sees it. So as a player stands there, I see the alert, I remember, and I can just go, oh, describe the pit trap, open it up, there we go. If there's a DC involved to jump away from it, I might put that as part of the text. Trap, DC dex to dodge, and then you've got it on there, and all you have to do is make it visible. I have put on the walls level something down here that we're going to talk about. In terms of light, I've put nothing down here. I have no light sources. Oh, there's one up here. That's a mistake. There are no light sources on this map. I have, however, put a couple of sounds on. So you'll know from Curse of Strahd that when you get down to the Catacombs, you start to hear a muffled chant that is hard to make out at first. You could make a playlist with that sound effect on, and you could go into the configuration of the scene and say, when this scene is activated, play this playlist. That works. That absolutely works fine. I don't really like doing that. Mainly because it plays all the time. And, well, yeah, it plays all the time. That can make it very, if it's a busy sound, like a chant or music, it can then make it difficult if something else happens and you want to play different music. Like I made a playlist for a location later in the game when I was new with Foundry. I made a playlist for Argenvostholt interior music. But then I had combat start and I played the combat music and I found it difficult to go and stop the interior ambient music to go out and do that. So I don't end up doing this too often. Also, when you place a sound effect on the map, you have the option for what's called volume easing. The closer the players get to the source of it, the louder it gets. So that means I can have the sound of the chanting centered on the stairs down. So as my players are moving around, they potentially can hear their way towards it. That works well for things like waterfalls, fireplaces, just letting your players move over closer. I also added another sound of just some whispering effects in here for the shadows. I feel like there needs to be a little bit of warning if players... That was it. I think the trigger for the shadows appearing is if the players take the orb off the Statue of Strahd. Just going in and seeing dead bodies in there. By all the things we've seen by this point, I've seen groups go, oh, well, these bodies were probably just Bagul's prisoners. There's nothing creepy in here now. I'm going to take this orb. So I've put a sound effect of just some voices whispering. So as they go in there, they hear the sound. Right. Let's see what it looks like from a player perspective. I am going to go into my scene, set it to nighttime. So this is as dark as my players would see. Remember, for my players, it's going to be even darker than how you see it today. Because I'm the DM, if I were to go here and then head back, you might not see it on the stream, but the player can still see a bit of fog of war here. They won't see that when they play. They'll see even darker than that. So, if you listen, if my Foundry sound, if my stream sound is picking up properly, you should be able to hear that quiet chant. And if he is ancient, he is the land. You can put fog down here. I have Halvor's torch effect be pretty bright, actually. You could arguably make this a fair bit dimmer. You could have an ambient track set up on top of the chant that makes it a bit creepier. One thing I have done, now I've not set an unlock sound, so you're going to hear now. Now, that's not going to unlock. In a live campaign, I would get rid of the unlock sound effect on that door because there isn't any. But it's locked. My player wants to open it. It's a large, heavy stone. I would get them to make the strength check, and if they succeed, when I click to open the door, okay, it was a bit long, that sound effect. I might change it, but you can see the effect that they pulled it out the way, and they can now see the sarcophagus inside. Again, remember, I've not got these gridded perfectly on this video, I'm afraid, but it was just a bit of a quick effort. In here, I can see there's a brick. The players can't yet because it's hidden. Now, I'm fairly certain in the module it describes that there's a curtain across this alcove. I know in my campaign I described it as one of the... Britain in the 70s had these hideous wooden bead curtains. Quite often people put them over the driver's seats of cars as like a posture fixer. I described it as one of them for some reason. But if I go into walls, I could put this as an ethereal wall. An ethereal wall can be passed through but not seen through by default. So that worked perfectly as like a bead curtain or as any sort of curtain. I like to draw my wall. When I have doors and windows, I like to put them next to what I'm doing and then holding shift, which overrides any of these snapping and gives you a much more surgical precision movement. I just like to move things over the nodes. I don't know why I've gotten into that habit. I like doing it. If I'm walling a room, I'll hold control and I'll go around. But when I'm just putting things over, I seem to like doing it that way. I feel it gives me slightly more precision over making sure that someone's gone in right. Actually, a player might possibly miss that. So what I think I'll do is I'm actually going to move it in slightly more, just so my players definitely notice there is a dip in the room. And now when he's in here, yeah, he will notice there's a bit of a dip into there. So we'll ignore the brick combat. We're going to head down into the shadow room. Now obviously I put the volume a bit too loud on the volume easing. So if it gets louder in there, it just goes on like that. It might be better if I've made the volume lower and increased the range. So it starts a bit sooner, but it starts much more quieter. But yeah, being in this room, they now hear whispering. Heading down. This door causes a lot of discussion. This door is not a door. It's a mimic by Raw. And a lot of people don't like the fact there's a mimic. They say, why is there a mimic in the house? And I know a lot of people take it out. I really like leaving that mimic in. I never call it a mimic. It's actually a mimic in the form of a door. I don't like to use a mimic stat block or talk about... I just like having it pretty much be like a manifestation of the house's evil. If you've read into the book, you know a lot of evil shit has gone on in this house. And that's why it's become the death house. It's haunted. I like having it so that the door is described as being in a bit of a better state than most things in the house. And the best way for them to find out is when they go to unlock it. As you may know about mimics or the mimic stat block, when it's in object form, they've just got this extreme adhesive. If you touch it, you can't get away from it again. If you get suitably scary art, player goes to open a door or use their lockpicks on it, they can't take the hand off the handle and a mouth starts to open up in the door. You could even use that ambient doors module to replace the unlock or the open sound with some sort of horrible monster noise or evil laughing, and then it becomes not so much combat but a bit of a panic for your player. I love as well, although don't force it, I love if the mimic manages to get away, if it manages just to revert to like it. I kind of like the idea of mimics having a bit of a natural form that's almost like the Terminator's when it's just melted into goop like the alloy, or Big Hero 6 where it just turns into like the modules that move away. I love if the Mimic can get away and if the players don't see where it is, because they will be scared of everything then, and it just keeps them even more on edge for the rest of the time they're in Death House. I'm just going to move Halvor to up here. Now, I showed you earlier my traps here. We've got a lot of stairs. Now, different players or different DMs feel differently about stairs. If this is 5 foot of stairs, and then this is 5 foot of stairs again, then a player who's here is technically 10 foot lower than being up here. Would they be able to see it? I've got nothing on. I've got nothing on in terms of wall effects. So you can see a player who's up here and down here can see up and down the stairs. I've done differently down here just for you. I have put, I'm trying to remember what I did here. I've put an ethereal wall, so it can be passed through but can't be seen through. But I've put in here wall directions going to the right. So this is a one-way wall. And when you do that, you can see that Foundry gives you an indicator of an arrow and then a wall showing which way is blocked off. By doing that one way, I've got it so they can't see up the stairs, because we can't see up past the top of the staircase. They can still pass through it, but if they were up here, they can see down. Now, you might like that as given more of an indication of depth and height. You might not like it. I just put one instance of it in here so you can see that it is available in case you want to have maps where you can fade off areas. And obviously we go down. The sound is at its loudest. And we can now go down to the basement of the Death House. So, again, this really suffers from being a ripped map, so very, very bad grid alignment, quite low resolution, I'm afraid, but it's more just to show you the concept. So I've walled it off, again, very rough. Most of this rough walling is because of how small the picture I had access to was. This is zoomed in pretty much as high as Foundry will go. So yours will be bigger than this, it will be easier to wall, and it will be much more straightforward. Main things of note in here. I didn't wall off all the alcoves individually because that doesn't look too good when you do it. I have not got a sound effect playing automatically because I couldn't find a decent sound effect that to hand. However, the soundboard module I've covered in a previous video has a section of bundled sounds which has cult chant. And that contains the common chants, including some of the ones from Mandy Mod's adjustments. I personally don't like these. You're going to hear one of them now. I think they're a bit too in your face and almost cartoony for how creepy I like to run the module. So here's what it sounds like, for example. I'm stopping that. So it doesn't really go with the quiet, muffled ambient we just had. There are versions of that out there by a user called Japluska, who I've probably mispronounced that terribly. I call him Zio, he hates it. He is the admin of the Curse of Strahd Discord and subreddit. A lot of the Curse of Strahd sound files out there on YouTube, he's actually recorded himself. I used them like 2 years ago, and now that I talk to him most days, I really notice it's his voice. Very, very strange. So you could have that looping, and he's got a version of it which is muffled, which we used upstairs, and he's got a much clearer version down here, so I would play that one. I've also put a couple of other things in here. I've put the secret door, which is default to closed, in the prison cells. I've put I've put an invisible door which is secret and open by default. So players won't see this and they won't see the option to open it. That's because there's a portcullis here. And when all the one must die happens and Logoth, I can't remember his raw name. I used the Mandy model Dragoner Guide to replace the Shambling Mound with some horrible flesh monstrosity, which is the child who was sacrificed in here, and all the people who've been killed have been turned into this flesh mound, at the heart of which is Walter, the baby. It's actually the first model. I actually created a model of Walter, which I'll show you here. I took one of my son's Skylanders toys, cut some parts off it, used a lot of red paint and red epoxy and a glue gun and some green stuff for tentacles and some Citadel skulls, and basically made a horrendous monstrosity of dripping flesh to fondly remember my time in Death House. So whatever your big bad is, you'd have the token here for it hidden in the body pile. When the portcullis comes down, as a DM, I can just toggle to close it. I think because I've installed that module after I made this, it's just going to go, yeah. You'd obviously want to replace that with a sound effect of a big heavy portcullis falling and slamming down. Bonus points if you can find one that's slamming down into water. And then your players have to turn the wheel and make the strength check to get out. In terms of what else is in here, I put a dripping water sound effect and a chant. So if I move Halvor... Oh, okay, quiet. If I move Halvor to where we come in, I'm going to turn our transition down to night. And when he comes down here... I didn't make the sound file big enough there. You can hear where my sound file obviously clips on the corner, so I'd need to go back and resize that. So your players would talk about the items that are in here. I'm turning my sound off now. I can't keep talking about that bar. So you've heard the chanting sound. They go in. Now I've got two things in here: water drip sounds. But also, this is where I did what I described to you earlier. I gave each of the pillars a small terrain wall outline so that it casts a shadow. It blocks vision behind it. I only did that in here so that you can see what that effect looks like. You might like that, you might not. You don't have to use it at all. So, you would have the event of the module in here, where either someone is killed, there's another chant you could play, sound file, one must die, one must die. You could put that on your soundboard. That's another one that's bundled up in here, but I don't really like it. One must die! Good God, that was loud. That would have kept going. So then, that's where Death House comes to an end, raw. You have the combat here. A lot of people run a skill challenge called Escape from Death House. Now, I've not set this up fully. I've tried to avoid taking a sip of my drink for as long as I can, sorry, but the throat is parched and I'm not good enough with videos to clip and edit. These are all done in one take so far. I'm dreading the day that someone rings my doorbell while I'm doing one, like 20 minutes in. So, Escape from Death House is a skill challenge where you can flavour it however you want. Like, I've got the malevolent spirit that's kept the house alive tries to take you with it now that you've killed Walter or the Shambling Mound, and the house creepiness just goes up, gets turned up to 11, and everything starts going wrong. The house is quite literally collapsing above them, and they've got to get out. First thing first, this being effective relies massively on you having appropriate music, I feel. You need tense music that is like go, 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 fast. I was really lucky that I managed to get a playlist that worked very well for my players. They were really invested in how frantic it was getting out of this place. Something else that only occurred to me about 5 minutes before I started making this video. In the last video about Death House, I talked about how I put loads of creepy assets in the hall and in the dining room, and I made them hidden. And when my players triggered the creepiness of Death House, I made it dark, and then I enabled all those modules. Well, I thought you could do one better with this. I'm going to show you. So, when my players leave and Death House is collapsing, They'd run back up the stairs to the Catacombs. Now, what I love the idea of doing, which didn't work for me very well in Fantasy Grounds, because Fantasy Grounds had a very different ideal of Fog of War. Before you load this scene back up for your players, I would recommend you going back to the Fog of War tab, the Vision tab, and clicking to reset Fog of War. Your players only walked through here half an hour earlier. Hide the map again. They've got to explore it. They don't know which way they're going. And you've got all these sound effects and this music, and you're describing the house collapsing around them, and they are, quite frankly, lost. They might go the wrong way. They need to get to here, as you'll know, the stairs back up, especially if, like me, you've hidden that staircase. But if they're lost in the dark, and you're describing all this creepy stuff, it can make them absolutely terrified even more, because you've taken away all that exploration they've had. Now, if you wanted to do a lot, you could have animated spell icons of, dust falling from the ceiling, of bats and cobwebs, insects crawling everywhere. There is nothing stopping you from duplicating the whole scene for Death House 1, 2, 3 and 4 and make ones called like Death House 1B, 2B. And in those duplicates, you can add all of your scary stuff, your big exciting spell effects and all of like quick escape, it's fallen down stuff. And you don't have to then quickly toggle between the two or go, reappearing things as DM. I'm definitely going to be doing that myself when I run Death House in the future. So I've got the nice mundane trip down and then the same areas again, but with the spooky ramped right up. What I did do is show you a little example of what you could do in the top floor of Death House. So you saw this location last time, but again, with the scary music, with the pressure, with the tension, I just added blood stains that weren't here before. I've given, animated spell effects. There are animated tokens out there that I don't have. I know someone who does. I might try and get them. Of like swinging blades and buzzsaws. And a lot of the entrances in the Escape from Death House are described as proper video game style Sen's Fortress, big swinging scythes that go across corridors that weren't there before. It's just everything going crazy. There's skill checks, players can take damage. You can have them on here, all swinging through. I put some fog effect on here. I haven't gone through the whole house and set this up again because I'm not going to be running it anytime soon. But I just wanted to show you that you could go back through all the locations and add in either these assets to be hidden, to be revealed when it's escape time. If you do that though, like I could have put these on here before I did Death House and just hide them and say I'll use them later. It can start to get quite visually busy, especially if things are moving and you're dragging player tokens around and they can't see any of this yet. But it's also work for you as a DM if between sessions you've got to go in and add all of these on ready. Duplicate the scene. That, I think, is everything with Death House in terms of Foundry. So in the last video, I showed you working the way up. Today, I showed you heading through those catacombs, heading down to the basement. When you are doing the escape, there are swarms of, I think, centipedes and spiders. You could add tokens for them onto here if your players start to open it. I like to web these corridors. I think there's some giant spiders in the Mandy mod guide that come emerging out of the open tombs. There's a lot you can do with this. Future videos will be better from me in terms of this series because, as you can see, if I delete Death House, I have done most of my Curse of Strahd module in here. We are going to be covering almost all of these locations in these guides. So, as ever, please do comment. If you have things that you either did in your Foundry version of Death House or what you think I missed an opportunity to do, please do leave a comment letting me know. I can add it into future videos or use it myself, make me a better DM. I'm sure the comments might be useful for everybody seeing what everybody else did. But yeah, as ever, thank you for your time. Bit of a longer video. Well done if you made it all the way through. I'll try and make future ones a bit quicker. But yeah, thank you very much. And until next time, see ya.